The Novak family's Chicago home pulsed with a kind of holiday energy that only comes once a year. Inside, relatives milled about the living room, balancing plates of roast turkey and green bean casserole while swapping stories that had long outlived their punchlines. There were cousins sprawled on the old blue sectional, uncles standing near the windows with bourbon, and my mom and dad drifting from guest to guest, faces stretched wide with pride and relief. For a rare moment, I let myself relax. My name's Jane Novak, and for years I'd been the steady middle daughter, quiet, responsible, never the star of the show, never the disappointment. It felt good to see my parents so happy, to hear laughter bouncing off the ceiling. These were the moments I wanted to hold on to, especially now that the family had scattered across the country. My older brother living in Portland, my younger sister, Ashley, a college senior in New York. I stood just at the edge of the kitchen, half hidden, feeling more like an observer than a participant. I was comfortable there, watching, not stirring the pot. But deep down, I sensed the peace wouldn't last. Ashley always brought a certain tension with her, a restless energy, the promise of a storm if you watched her closely enough. I tried to avoid her gaze, busying myself with refilling the mashed potatoes, but eventually, our eyes met across the room. Ashley was already pacing, biting her lip, rolling her eyes at her cousin Sarah's old story about summer camp. It was a small thing, but I knew my sister's moods better than anyone. I braced myself, silently hoping she'd keep whatever was brewing inside her to herself, just for tonight. But hope, in my experience, was never enough. Suddenly, Ashley's voice sliced through the cozy hum, loud enough to catch everyone's attention. "You know, Jane, it's always about you, isn't it?" as she called out, lips curled in a smirk. "All these years, you're still living in Chicago, still working that same job, still pretending you're better than the rest of us. What do you even have to show for it?" The words hung in the air, sharp as broken glass. I felt every eye in the room swivel toward me, family, friends, neighbors, even Grandma, who always fell asleep before dessert. My hand tightened around my glass, and heat crept up my cheeks. Embarrassment, white-hot and suffocating, choked any reply I could have managed. The room froze. Forks paused mid-air, conversations stuttered into silence. Even the dog, Max, stopped snuffling under the table. Time seemed to collapse around Ashley's accusation. For a split second, I wondered if anyone would step in, if my parents would chide her, if Sarah or one of my brothers would joke it off, if anyone would break the tension. But nobody did. Nobody moved. Ashley was waiting for me to react. I knew that. If I said anything, if I fought back, it would only fuel her. That was the pattern, and I'd learned long ago that arguing with her in public was a losing game. So I swallowed hard, forcing myself to look straight at her, refusing to let my voice shake. Before I could say a word, Ashley strode to the coffee table, grabbed the nearest glass, a stemless one with her favorite Malbec, and hurled the contents at me. Red wine splattered across my dress, cold and sticky, shocking me to my core. The splash echoed around the room, followed by a gasp, then silence deeper than anything I'd ever heard. Wine soaked through the fabric, seeping into my skin and burning with shame. I stood there for one breathless moment, the center of a spectacle I'd never asked for, my dignity in tatters. All around me, the people I loved most seemed paralyzed by shock or cowardice. I couldn't tell which. My first instinct was to lash out, to demand why no one was defending me, to ask what I had done to deserve being publicly humiliated by my own sister. But anger wasn't going to help. Instead, I placed my own glass gently on the table, smoothed the wine-soaked front of my dress, and straightened my shoulders. I turned and walked out, each step deliberate and silent, even as chaos erupted behind me, voices rising, someone hurrying to clean up, my mom's anxious apology floating after me like a plea I couldn't answer. Outside, the November air slapped me harder than Ashley's words ever could. It was cold and damp, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and distant traffic. I paused on the front steps, my heels clicking against the concrete, my breath trembling in the dark. In the quiet, a storm brewed inside me. Not just anger at Ashley's cruelty, but something deeper, a sense of betrayal from everyone who had stood by and watched it happen. It was as if their silence had given her permission to treat me this way. The wine would wash out. The sting of her words might even fade, eventually. But the way nobody spoke up for me? That was going to take a lot longer to forget. I walked quickly down the driveway to my car, my hands shaking so hard I dropped my keys twice before getting the door open. Sitting in the driver's seat, surrounded by the familiar mess of receipts and half-empty coffee cups, I stared at my own reflection in the rearview mirror. My face was blotchy and red, my eyes glossy with tears I refused to let fall. I looked like a stranger, a version of myself I never wanted to be. Vulnerable. Alone. And for the first time in years, I wondered if maybe Ashley was right. Maybe I had spent too long being the dependable one, the fixer, the peacekeeper. Maybe my silence had only ever taught her that I'd always take whatever she dished out. But something shifted inside me that night. As I sat in the dark, dress ruined and pride shredded, I realized I was done accepting the role everyone expected me to play. Ashley thought she'd won by humiliating me in front of everyone. She had no idea that I was sitting on a secret that could shatter her world more thoroughly than any glass of wine ever could. And for the first time, I was ready to use it. Sitting in my car, I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles ached. The world outside felt impossibly still, just the quiet hush of distant traffic, the thump of my heart in my ears, and the vague glow of my parents' house through the frosted windshield. Behind those windows, the party would be limping back to life, everyone pretending nothing had happened, hoping to salvage the night. But the damage was done. I didn't start the engine right away. Instead, I let my head fall back against the seat and tried to steady my breathing. The humiliation still stung, but what hurt more was the knowledge that not a single person, my parents, my cousins, my brothers, had come after me. Not even a text. Not a knock on the window to check if I was okay. Their silence, more than Ashley's outburst, made me feel completely alone. Why was it always like this? Why did my family let her get away with everything? Maybe it was because she was the youngest, the star student, the one everyone said had so much potential. She'd always been able to twist the truth, rewrite the story so she was the victim or the misunderstood genius, while I played the reliable, invisible sister. The memories flickered behind my eyelids, every family event where I'd covered for her lateness, every time I'd helped her out of a jam, the times I'd snuck money into her backpack during her first tough year at NYU so she could buy groceries or textbooks without having to ask our parents. Even the apartment she lived in now, she thought she was paying the rent herself, but she didn't know half the money came from me, deposited quietly when my parents fell short. None of that seemed to matter. Not now. My phone vibrated on the seat beside me. For a hopeful moment, I thought maybe, just maybe, someone cared enough to check on me. But it was just a spam notification, a pharmacy reminder I'd been meaning to turn off for weeks. I tossed it aside, frustrated. Through the windshield, the city looked different, strange, almost hostile. The same streets I'd grown up on, the same block where I'd learned to ride a bike, felt cold and foreign. I closed my eyes and let myself remember other nights, quieter ones, when Ashley and I would sneak out onto the porch after everyone was asleep, whispering secrets into the dark. How had we become this? A tear slipped free. I wiped it away, angry at myself for caring so much. Ashley didn't deserve my tears. My family's silence didn't deserve my heartbreak. I thought about going back inside. Maybe if I returned, head held high, I could salvage a sliver of my pride. Maybe if I confronted Ashley in front of everyone, I could force them to see what she really was. How careless, how cruel. But then what? Another fight, more hurt, another memory that would haunt me every time I walked into my parents' house. No. Tonight wasn't about fighting for their approval anymore. It was about reclaiming myself. I started the car, letting the heater blast away the lingering chill. The drive back to my own apartment felt endless, headlights flickering across empty streets, the city lights blurring in my tired eyes. I parked in my usual spot, a little too far from the entrance, the price of coming home late, and hurried upstairs, the wine stain on my dress already drying to a rusty brown. Inside, everything was just as I'd left it. Laundry on the couch, books stacked in haphazard towers, a few take-out containers on the counter. My small, cozy apartment was nothing fancy, but it was mine, bought with long hours at a non-profit, late-night freelance projects, and sheer stubbornness. Here, nobody could throw a glass of wine at me. Here, I was safe. I peeled off my ruined dress, tossed it in the hamper, and pulled on an old college hoodie. My reflection in the bathroom mirror was tired but determined. I wasn't going to let tonight define me. Still, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, replaying every detail, Ashley's voice, the shocked faces, the way the room had frozen, the sickening weight of silence pressing down on me. I kept coming back to one thing. She thought she could break me, that humiliation would be the end of my story. She had no idea what I was capable of. Across the room, my laptop's screen glowed in the dark. I opened the old folder marked receipts, literal ones, scanned and organized, every transfer and payment I'd ever made to help Ashley, every loan I'd paid off, every tuition installment when my parents couldn't cover her dreams. It was all there, neat and irrefutable. I'd never planned to reveal them. I wasn't the type to demand gratitude, to parade my sacrifices. But maybe, just maybe, it was time she knew. Time everyone knew. As the sun began to rise over Chicago, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let her rewrite my story one more time. I would choose how this ended. Tomorrow, everything would start to change. The next morning, the world felt different, brighter and colder, as if the city had pressed a reset button while I wasn't looking. My phone was still silent. No apology from Ashley, no message from my parents, nothing at all from the family whose approval I'd always tried to earn. The emptiness in my inbox stung, but I told myself it was a gift. Silence meant I was free to do what I needed without interference. I sat at my kitchen table, fingers wrapped around a mug of coffee, staring at my laptop. A folder of receipts waited on the screen, years of invisible work that had kept Ashley's life stitched together. Rent checks. Tuition payments. The time I'd paid her overdue cell bill so she wouldn't lose contact with her internship. The scholarship she'd missed out on, so I quietly made up the difference behind her back. I scrolled through the files, the dates stretching back to her freshman year. I remembered how scared she'd been, calling me in tears because her roommate was awful and the city felt too big and the money was running out. I'd wanted to protect her from all of it, just like an older sister should. But protecting her had a price, and last night proved it. With a steady breath, I opened my bank's website and scrolled to the automatic payments for Ashley's tuition. There it was, the next payment scheduled for Friday, covering her final semester at NYU. I hovered over the cancel a button. For a moment, guilt stabbed at me. Was I really ready to let her fall? Was this punishment or just overdue honesty? I pressed the button. Cancelled. Just like that, the invisible cord I'd held for years snapped. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the sunlight on the wall, feeling both lighter and heavier at once. A small voice whispered that I was being cruel. But another, deeper voice, one that had grown stronger since last night, said, "No. You're just done being her safety net." The rest of the day moved in slow motion. I worked from home, answering emails and drafting reports for my nonprofit. I tried to focus on other people's problems: homelessness, food insecurity, mental health crises. That was my work, my real calling. Helping people who needed it, not just the ones who took it for granted. But my mind kept circling back to Ashley and the rest of the family. Would anyone even notice what I'd done? Would my parents finally see who had kept Ashley afloat all these years? Or would they just blame me for her fall? By afternoon, my resolve had solidified. I dug the folder of receipts out of my desk, printing them all and slipping them into a manila envelope. I knew what I was going to do with them, even if it scared me. That night, I got a text from my mom. "Hey sweetie, hope you're okay. Don't let Ashley get to you. Call me if you want to talk." No apology. No acknowledgement of what happened. Just the usual, gentle deflection. I stared at the message, fingers itching to reply, but in the end, I put my phone down. Instead, I let myself think back to all the little ways I'd given up pieces of myself for Ashley. The missed vacations, the thrift store clothes so she could have something new, the late nights worrying about how to stretch my paycheck. I'd always believed that family meant sacrifice, that love was measured by how much you could quietly endure. But sacrifice without respect wasn't love. It was self-erasure. I realized then that I wasn't just angry at Ashley. I was angry at myself, too, for making it so easy, for never setting boundaries, for letting her believe she could treat me however she liked and still expect my support. The next day, I bought a plane ticket to Florida. My parents had retired there a year ago, trading snowy Midwestern winters for a pastel bungalow near the ocean. The envelope of receipts went into my carry-on. I knew Ashley would be coming down for winter break soon. My parents had already planned a big family dinner to patch things up. I wasn't going to let them sweep it all under the rug this time. The flight felt endless. I stared out the window, thinking about all the times I'd flown to help Ashley move apartments or start a new job, always the fixer, always the first call in a crisis. I wondered what she would do now, when the crisis was of her own making and I was no longer there to save her. Arriving in Florida, I found my parents' house just as I remembered, cheerful, cluttered, smelling of sunscreen and lemon cleaner. My mom fussed over me, my dad cracked jokes, and for a little while, it almost felt like nothing had changed. But I kept the envelope close, never letting it out of my sight. That evening, while my parents cooked dinner, the front door burst open and Ashley swept in, sunglasses on her head, suitcase in tow, full of her usual noisy energy. For a moment, our eyes met, and I saw something new in her expression, a flicker of uncertainty, maybe even fear. She barely said hello before launching into a rant about the university. They froze my account. I can't register for next semester, and nobody will tell me why. It's not fair. I have finals next week. I need this fixed. My parents looked bewildered, glancing between us. Honey, I'm sure it's just a glitch, my mom soothed, already pulling out her phone to call the university. I sat at the kitchen table, envelope in my lap, watching Ashley unravel. For the first time, I felt calm, not angry. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. I slid the envelope across the table toward her. Maybe this will help you understand, I said quietly. She frowned, pulled out the stack of receipts, and began to read. Ashley's hands shook as she flipped through the papers, her eyes darting from line to line. At first, she seemed confused, her lips moving silently as she read the dates and dollar amounts, the university letterhead, the bank transfers, my name printed clearly on every receipt. Then, slowly, the confusion dissolved, replaced by disbelief and a rising, desperate fear. She looked up at me, her voice barely more than a whisper. Jane, what is all this? My parents, seeing the tension, finally paid attention. My dad took the envelope from Ashley, adjusting his glasses as he scanned the pages. My mom leaned over his shoulder. For a few seconds, the only sound in the room was the soft whir of the ceiling fan, stirring the humid Florida air. I watched the truth dawn on them, their faces changing from mild annoyance to shock, then to something softer, regret, maybe, or just the shock of seeing how much had been hidden right in front of their eyes. I tried to keep my voice steady. That's every payment I ever made for Ashley. Tuition, rent, bills, everything. I've been covering it for years. I paused, feeling the weight of every sleepless night, every anxious call to my bank, every time I'd chosen her needs over my own. Ashley's mouth worked soundlessly, like she wanted to argue, but the evidence was irrefutable. I didn't know, she said finally. I thought Mom and Dad were helping. My parents stared at her. We did help, Ash, and my dad said quietly, but not like this. Not the way your sister did. My mom reached out, taking my hand. Her eyes shone with tears. Jane, why didn't you say anything? A bitter laugh slipped out before I could stop it. Because every time I tried to talk about money, you both said not to worry. And I didn't want Ashley to feel bad. I thought if I just kept going, maybe she'd finally realize she didn't need to compete with me, or tear me down to feel bigger. I wanted her to succeed without carrying the burden I had. Ashley slumped in her chair, the bravado and arrogance gone. For a long moment, she didn't say a word. She just stared at the receipts, as if seeing her life from the outside for the first time. I expected anger or denial, but what I got was silence, and in that silence, I finally felt free. It was no longer my job to fix things for her. The truth was out in the open, and now she'd have to find her own way forward. But my parents weren't finished. My dad stood, pulling his chair closer to the table, his expression thoughtful. I'm sorry, Jane. I wish we'd seen what was happening. I wish we'd stepped in sooner, before any of this got so out of hand. My mom nodded, squeezing my hand. We took your help for granted. We let Ashley take it for granted. That's on us. Ashley finally spoke, her voice small. I never asked you to do any of this. I met her gaze, feeling the years of tension between us. No, you didn't. But you never refused it either. You never questioned where the help was coming from, because you wanted to believe it was your own hard work, or maybe just luck. I kept waiting for you to grow up, Ash. But maybe I was the one who needed to grow up and let you. A heavy silence settled over the table. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like the family disappointment. I felt like someone who had simply tried to do the right thing, even if it was invisible work. Ashley looked away, her eyes brimming with tears. What happens now? I shrugged, feeling lighter than I had in years. Now, you figure it out. You talk to the university, you get a job, you pay your own bills. I'm done being your safety net, Ash. I love you, but I can't keep pretending that loving you means saving you from every consequence. The rest of the evening was quiet, but something in the air had shifted. My parents were gentler with me, asking real questions about my job and my life. Ashley mostly kept to herself, staring out the window at the swaying palm trees, lost in thought. I wondered what she was planning, whether she felt anger, shame, or some messy combination of both. As I lay in bed that night, listening to the Florida rain tap against the roof, I let myself grieve, not just for the years I'd lost being everyone's rescuer, but for the relationship I'd never really had with my sister. Maybe it could have been different, if only we'd been honest from the start. Maybe, in time, it still could be. But for now, I let go of the weight I've been carrying. For once, my life, and my choices, felt like they truly belonged to me. The days after the truth came out were strangely quiet. My parents moved around the house with new gentleness, toward me, toward each other, even toward Ashley, who now seemed smaller and more cautious. There were fewer raised voices, more silent meals, a new hesitance in every interaction. In some ways, it was awkward, but it was honest in a way we hadn't experienced for years. Ashley barely spoke to me. She spent most of her time in her old bedroom, on the phone with the university or scrolling endlessly through job postings. I could hear her frustration through the thin walls, half-whispered complaints, the occasional soft sob. She hadn't apologized. She hadn't thanked me, either. But I didn't need either anymore. One afternoon, I found my mom in the kitchen making coffee. She motioned for me to sit. "Jane, I've been thinking about what you said. About the sacrifices you made. About what it cost you." She paused, tears threatening again. "We saw you as the strong one. The one who didn't need help. But maybe we were just afraid to see what you really needed." It was the closest my mom had ever come to admitting she hadn't always understood me. I reached for her hand. "It's okay, Mom." I didn't know how to ask for help, either. Maybe that's on me. We sat there in companionable silence, the kind that says more than words ever could. For the first time, I felt seen. That evening, Ashley emerged from her room, her eyes red but her chin set with new determination. I called the financial aid office. They said there's a wait list for emergency scholarships. If I want to finish the semester, I'll have to pay upfront or take out a loan. She paused, glancing at me, but I only nodded. I wasn't swooping in to fix it this time. I found a job listing, as she continued, for a barista at the cafe near campus. It's not much, but it's a start. For a moment, her voice wavered, pride and vulnerability mixing in a way I hadn't seen since we were kids. "I just wanted you to know I'm trying." "I know," I said quietly, offering a small smile. "You'll figure it out." You always do. She nodded, and for a fleeting second, I saw the sister I'd missed, softer, less defensive, just a young woman trying to find her way. That night, my dad lingered at the dinner table after everyone else had gone to bed. He stared into his mug, searching for words. "Jane, you ever think you gave too much?" he asked. I considered his question. Sometimes. But I thought that was what family did. He nodded. It is. But family's also supposed to notice when someone's drowning. He looked up at me, regret clear in his eyes. I'm sorry we didn't notice sooner. I shrugged, feeling a strange peace. I'm not angry anymore, Dad. I just want things to change. Me too, he said softly. A week later, I was back in Chicago, standing in my little apartment, sunlight pouring through the windows. I felt lighter, as if I'd left an old burden behind in Florida. My phone buzzed, a text from my mom. Ashley started her new job. She said to tell you she's okay. For a long moment, I just stared at the screen, letting the relief wash over me. Maybe we'd never be the kind of family that said everything out loud, but maybe we could start being more honest in the ways that mattered. At work, I found myself more present than I'd been in months. I poured my energy into new projects at the nonprofit, signed up for a pottery class I'd always wanted to try, even agreed to go out for drinks with friends I'd been neglecting. My life slowly filled with color again. But even as I started to rebuild, there was a new emptiness where my sense of responsibility had been. For so long, my identity was wrapped up in being the fixer, the one who quietly held everyone together. Letting go of that role was like learning to walk all over again. One Saturday, while running errands at the grocery store, I caught sight of a familiar figure behind the register. It was Ashley, hair pulled back, wearing the cafe's green apron, moving with careful efficiency as she rang up customers. She looked up, surprise flickering across her face before she gave me a small, uncertain wave. I waved back, resisting the urge to rush over and ask if she needed anything. This was her journey now. At home that night, I thought about the sisters we used to be, how we'd played make-believe in the backyard, shared secrets under the covers, fought over clothes and then made up with whispered apologies. Growing up had pulled us apart, but maybe honesty could stitch us together again, little by little. I couldn't fix Ashley's problems anymore. But maybe I could finally start living my own life, messy, imperfect, and entirely mine. Spring in Chicago arrived slowly, as if the city itself was uncertain about shedding winter's grey. I found myself noticing the change for the first time in years, the sharp tang of thawed earth, the way sunlight lingered just a little longer in the evenings. Maybe it was because I finally had space to breathe. Maybe it was because, for once, I was living for myself. My days grew busier, but in a good way. I met friends for brunch in Lincoln Park, signed up for a 5K on a dare, and even let myself consider dating again. At work, my manager offered me a shot at leading a project, a new outreach program for women leaving difficult situations. I said yes without hesitation. The old Jane might have worried about balancing everything, but the new Jane wanted to see what she was really capable of. I still thought about Ashley, of course. I'd see her Instagram stories, pictures of latte art, shots of textbooks open late at night, and the occasional selfie with her new coworkers. She rarely messaged me directly, but every once in a while, a photo of a sunset or a new pair of thrift shoes would pop up in my DMs with a simple "and made me think of you." One Sunday afternoon, my parents FaceTimed me from their porch in Florida. My dad held up the phone so I could see the dog sprawled across his lap. My mom waved, hair wild from the breeze. "How's the project going?" And my mom asked, her voice bright. "It's actually amazing," I told her. "We've already helped 3 women get jobs and safe places to live. I feel useful." My dad grinned. "We're proud of you, kid. Always have been." Something in his tone, gentler, less rushed, reminded me that families could change, too, if you gave them space and time. Maybe we'd never be perfect, but we were learning. After the call, I pulled out a notebook and began making a list of things I wanted for myself, no one else. Travel. Learn Spanish. Go hiking in the Rockies. Forgive myself for old mistakes. It felt silly at first, but with every line, I felt more like the person I'd always hoped to become. A few weeks later, I ran into Ashley again. This time, it wasn't at the grocery store or the coffee shop, but at a community fundraiser my nonprofit was hosting. She'd come with a friend, both of them still in their work aprons. Ashley spotted me near the silent auction table and hesitated, her eyes searching my face for a sign. "Hey," she said, tucking a stray strand of hair behind her ear. "Hey," I echoed, unsure what else to say. The air between us was uncertain, but not tense, more like the moment before a storm finally passes and the sun peeks through. Ashley looked at the display of hand-painted mugs. "I heard about your project. My boss told us about it. One of the women you helped, she used to come to our cafe." I nodded, waiting. She fidgeted with her sleeve. I wanted to say thank you. Not just for her, but for, everything." She glanced at the floor, then back up, cheeks flushed. "I'm sorry it took me so long to see it. And I'm sorry for how I treated you. I think I was just scared. Of failing. Of needing help." The words landed softly, but they hit their mark. I felt my own eyes sting. "I know," I said. "Me too." For a moment, the noise of the fundraiser faded, and we just stood there, 2 sisters, both changed, both still learning how to be honest. Ashley smiled, a little shaky, but real. "Can we start over?" I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. "Yeah. I'd like that." We spent the rest of the evening side by side, chatting about little things, coffee shop mishaps, classes she was taking, the funny way our mom talked to the dog. It was ordinary and extraordinary all at once. Later, as I walked home beneath the city's neon glow, I realized something had shifted inside me. I didn't need to be the hero or the martyr anymore. I could just be Jane, sister, friend, woman, human. And that was enough. Ashley would never be the same little sister I used to rescue, but maybe, just maybe, we could become something better, equals, growing alongside each other, one small step at a time. The old burdens were gone. In their place was a new kind of freedom, the kind that comes from telling the truth, from letting go, from loving yourself enough to choose your own happiness. And for the first time in a long time, I was genuinely excited to see what came next. Summer crept into Chicago with a quiet confidence, all soft breezes and long golden evenings. By June, my apartment windows were flung wide, the sounds of street musicians and kids playing baseball in the park drifting in with the fresh air. My life had fallen into a steady rhythm, a blend of work, self-care, and the simple pleasures I'd forgotten to notice for so long. Ashley and I settled into a cautious, gentle friendship. We weren't suddenly inseparable, and there were still moments when old hurts simmered just beneath the surface. But we texted now, sometimes just to share a song or a silly meme, sometimes to ask for advice or vent about the grind of adulthood. Sometimes, Ashley would send a picture of the new dish she'd learned to make at the cafe, or I'd text her a snap of my latest pottery creation, the glaze still drying on my windowsill. One Friday evening, Ashley called me unexpectedly. "Hey, are you home? Can I come over?" Her voice sounded nervous but determined. Half an hour later, she arrived carrying a grocery bag, cheeks pink from the summer heat. "I thought maybe we could cook dinner together," as she said, awkward but sincere. "I, found this old recipe from when we were kids." As we chopped vegetables and laughed about our early kitchen disasters, the years of distance seemed to fall away. We sat cross-legged on the living room floor, eating pasta from mismatched bowls and talking about everything and nothing. For the first time, it wasn't about fixing or saving or competing. It was just about being together, two sisters learning how to enjoy each other's company again. After dinner, Ashley grew quiet. She fiddled with her bracelet, then looked up at me. "I know I've said this before, but I'm sorry for how I treated you. Not just that night, but for all the times I took you for granted. I didn't know how much you were carrying." I shook my head. "It's not all on you, Ash. I could have spoken up sooner. Set boundaries. Asked for help myself." She smiled. Maybe we both needed to fall apart a little to put ourselves back together. She reached over and squeezed my hand, and I felt something inside me relax, a knot of old pain, finally beginning to untangle. The weeks slipped by, each one easier than the last. My parents visited for the 4th of July, bringing their Florida energy and a trunk full of fresh oranges. We all sat in the backyard watching fireworks burst over the skyline, the air thick with laughter and the smell of barbecue. My dad raised a glass and toasted it to new beginnings, and I felt the truth of it deep in my bones. At work, I led the launch of the new outreach program. Our little nonprofit made headlines in a local magazine, and I was invited to speak at a conference downtown. For the first time, I felt like my efforts, my quiet, steady work, were finally being seen and valued. One evening, as I was walking home from a meeting, I spotted Ashley behind the counter of the cafe. She was helping an older woman count change, her voice patient and kind. There was no trace of the entitled, restless girl who'd thrown wine at me all those months ago. Instead, I saw someone who was learning, who was struggling, but who was finally, genuinely trying. After her shift, we met on the sidewalk. The city lights cast a soft glow over everything, and a gentle breeze lifted her hair. "You look happy," I said. She laughed, a real, unguarded sound. "I think I am. It's not the life I thought I'd have, but I think I'm finally figuring out who I am." We stood there in the warm Chicago night, not saying much. It didn't feel necessary. Everything important had already been said, or was being said now, in the quiet, in the shared look of understanding. As summer turned toward fall, the changes held. Ashley applied for scholarships and started taking community college classes, dreaming about a career in social work. I took a solo weekend trip to the Rockies, hiking above the tree line and watching the sun spill gold across the distant peaks. On the flight home, I realized how proud I was, not just of Ashley, or even my family, but of myself. Of the woman I'd become by choosing to step back, to set boundaries, to let go and let others learn on their own. There were still hard days, of course. Days when old insecurities tugged at me, when family dynamics threatened to pull us back into old patterns. But there was a new balance now, a fragile, hard-earned peace. Sometimes, living well really is the best kind of justice. Not revenge, not bitterness, but growth. Moving forward, stronger and wiser, while those who once hurt you are left to reflect and, if they're willing, to grow as well. That, I realized, was the sweetest kind of freedom.